Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another session. I am so excited to have a special guest here with us today, Lisa Tahir. Am I saying that correctly?
You are.
Beautiful. Yes.
Yeah.
She is going to be chatting with us about all things the world, life, her book that she has put out recently that has been acknowledged by the Dalai Lama. And I'm just so excited for where this conversation goes. I feel like it's going to be really powerful. So, Lisa, please introduce yourself, tell everyone all the things, and then we're just going to let the conversation grow as it's meant to today.
Riley, I want to thank you for having me on your podcast and to be with your audience today. Hello, everybody. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I have been such for over 20 years. And I got to a place in my personal and professional development about 5 years ago where I started to wonder what is beyond the narrative and the story of our wounds, of the things that have hurt us, the people that have disappointed us, and our reactions, our responses to them, and feeling like I was kind of mired in some of the same narrative, the same story, like preventing myself from moving forward in my personal life and wondering how I can help my clients to keep moving forward instead of rehashing those same memories, those same experiences, because I've learned that what we speak about grows and what we focus our attention upon, we get more of it. And so it's kind of counterintuitive to the therapy process to turn away from those things. Yet I started to kind of feel into the balance between needing to heal things that we have experienced and needing to really give that airtime, our heart space, be heard and seen, and really empathetically attune to ourselves. And then at that certain point where it's like, okay, got that. What is the new story of the life we want to live, how we see ourselves, like really starting to imagine, visualize to the point with emotion that, like, as if it's real, like, who do I need to become?
Yeah.
What does that look like each day? How will it feel? And that's what my book kind of journeys into is how to help us all do that on a daily basis. And I just want to pause. I see you nodding your head. I'm wondering what you're thinking, Riley, about this.
I love this so much because when I first started my journey of just personal development, I was like, okay, I'm dealing with a trauma. My husband had 4 open heart surgeries in the
Mm,
span of 2 years, which is typically unheard of. My son had open heart surgery at 4 months old. So there's
wow.
all these
Yes.
circumstances. And for the most part, my life was relatively cozy. I mean, there's the heartbreak stories, and then there's the lost and I don't know what to do stories, but I never really experienced trauma. And when I finally did, as if we like all have to. I mean, I feel like we do. We have to experience some form of trauma because it really helps us to start pulling out of the narratives of the world and start asking, okay,
Mm,
what else is there? And I started to study high level achievers, entrepreneurs, people like Lewis Howes and Jay Shetty and Gabby Bernstein and some of
yes.
the top 54 Ford acknowledged peoples in the magazine, like started looking at what they were doing. And when you're talking about visualization, it is the thing that is what everyone talks about. It's
Hmm.
becoming that energy. It's looking at your wounds. It's saying, there's so much more to this than just the suffering that you did get to go through. And it's just so beautiful to hear that it doesn't matter who I interview, that's the experience. It's like there's a point where you just have to put in the work and really start looking beyond what you're experiencing. So I'm just like sitting here taking it all in because it's like yes, that's what it is. It's visualizing, it's stepping into that role, it's embodying it, it's taking those actions from that space. So so
Yeah,
good.
Riley, and what I hear you saying too, which I'm reminded of in your words, it's the power of belief,
Yeah.
our power of belief, and what isn't yet manifested, isn't yet seen, but we so deeply desire and want. And a lot of the people you referenced, all of them, I read and study as well, including the precursors, like people like Neville Goddard
Yes.
and Charles Hennell and Ernest Holmes that really spoke about Florence Scovel Shinn, even who I reference in my book. She in the 20s, spoke about the power of our intuition
Yeah.
and the ability of our mind to visualize. I feel like you have her book probably. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
We're right in alignment.
The magic path of intuition. This book single-handedly changed my life. And I think I read it in about an hour. It's not
Okay,
very
I'm writing
big.
this down. I haven't read that. The
Oh,
Magic Path of Intuition.
yeah. Basically a summary of all of Florence's teachings. That is basically the foundation of Lois
Yeah.
House's work, or Lewis Hayes's work. There we go. And it was what got me into the intuition beyond the personal development.
Yes. And I think it's such, as we spoke about briefly before coming live, there's such a perfect marriage between psychology and spirituality, metaphysics, quantum physics.
Yeah.
Because since we are, and the more I read, Riley, about energy and like we're vibrating particles and nothing is really solid matter, it just appears to be, that we really have say so based upon what we believe, and it's exercising that belief. Sometimes it takes a bit in this time frame for it to show itself to us and to others, and I know that's where I've had to really learn to support myself in the belief, it's coming, it's on its way, and just really maintaining that position within your own mind's eye of, I believe this to be true for me. I'm just gonna keep getting ready to be ready, so to speak, as Abraham Hicks says so well. And like, it's like that daily investment in what's going to light me up. Like today, it's being with you on this show and seeing my clients and going for a walk this afternoon. That like what we're doing in the meantime, so to speak, is so important to cultivate. And I've even learned, Riley, keep more of it to myself. I get so excited, like I sense you do too. So I'll share with a close friend, oh my God, like this is what I'm manifesting. And it really freaks some people out, like that don't, have this paradigm, which is fine if you don't. I just so desire everyone to believe that our minds are powerful enough to shift outcomes and create the things that we want. And as I read last night in this book, The Master Key System by Charles Hannell, he talks about the only patient we have is ourself. We just have to convince ourselves. And I read that over and over, like, okay, I don't need to go convince my best friends. I don't need to convince, my clients. I just really need to believe. And I think it can be hard when we get so passionately excited, right? Like about something, but I'm learning to just hold the vision and be that teacher by example. Like let my life unfold and people that resonate will come. And I'm kind of wondering what you think about this part of it.
Yeah. Everything you're saying, Lisa, is just speaking to me on a soul level. Like I can't help but like sway and nod and just be in the motion of the words that you are sharing right now, because that's it in a nutshell. This human evolution, spiritual evolution, psychological evolution. It is in the belief. It's in the power of the belief. It's like one thing that really struck me when I started to get more into learning about intuition and spirituality and all that, the energy stuff, was that I had come across, and by no coincidence, because nothing is a coincidence, a series of videos where it was like people who have superhuman powers in the nick of time, right?
Yes.
So it's like the car flips over and the dad goes in the back and he lifts the car over because his kids are in it. It's like, you can't tell me that that's an isolated incident. It's that the belief and the adrenaline and all of it was so dominant in that moment, where that person did not believe anything other than that car was going to be flipped over so he could get his kids out. And when I saw this, it was like something in me just lit up, and I was like, what is this? And how do I learn more of this? How do I how do I understand this? How do I harness that ability and apply it into my everyday life? And when you were talking about, it's about holding that vision and keeping some of it to yourself, right? Not
Mhm.
everybody's always going to be on your team. And that's okay, because everybody's on their own journey simultaneously. And
Mhm.
when we really start to dive into what's lighting us up and what our passions are and what means something to us, and we ground that in and we act as if, and we hold that belief and we tune into that vision and we move it through ourselves in our everyday actions, and even in the actions that don't feel aligned or might feel like a mistake in the moment, they're still leading you or redirecting you to an even more powerful course. And it's like these things, whether people want to acknowledge it or not, the world is just reflecting that back to them right now. That's
Right.
how I view everything that's transpiring in the world. It's no matter what you're faced with, no matter what challenge you're suffering through or overcoming or being presented with, it's a mirror. It's all a mirror of where you're being invited to harness a deeper belief and even value within yourself. And
Yes.
it just makes my, like, I do have the energy to like hold it all in my body with how excited I get with this,
Me
because it's like
too.
this is what the world needed. Everyone's like, oh, it's so chaotic, and you're right, it is, but like it's so beautiful. It's
It
so
is.
beautiful watching people have those light bulb moments where it's like, I get it. I see where this struggle has led me to here. I see why I'm suffering through this, because it's helping me to realize this. And there's balance and there's peace and there's intuition above all else. And it's like a breath of fresh air. It really is.
It is. Absolutely yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I would love to know from you. Um, and we can dive into this because this is really a multifaceted question, but how has the science of psychology and spirituality really helped you to understand more for yourself how you're operating, connecting, and moving? And as a part two, how has that helped you to go deeper with your clients as well?
Yeah, that's such a good question, Riley. And I'm thinking that that causes me to reflect upon when I was writing my book, and now it's available, the Chiron effect, healing our core wounds through astrology, empathy, and
Mm.
self-forgiveness. I realized that astrology was like the diagnostic point to understand a placement in our birth charts called Chiron, Chiron. And for me at first that felt a little weird because I'm a psychotherapist and I know basics about astrology. I know it to be a symbolic language. I know it offers us a blueprint of where stars and planets were upon our date of birth and our time of birth. And it's something I just kind of looked at like most everyone does. Okay, this is interesting and there's some truth, but I was somehow led in meditation when I was asking what's beyond the story of
Mm.
our woundedness. This word Chiron kept coming up. And so I was led to research because it kept coming up. It didn't like let me go. And some of you listening might know that experience where you ask a question and the answer is kind of weird, but it keeps coming back up for
Yeah.
you, like everywhere you look. So it's like the universe really wants you to pause and go down that path of thought. And so I did. I was like, okay, I'm just going to research more than what I knew about Chiron. And I discovered that this was such a beautiful diagnostic place in our birth chart that speaks to an area on a spectrum from where we're vulnerable up to and including where we're wounded. And that being the diagnostic point, because that place, be it a wounding, a vulnerability in your sense of your value and worth, if it's a neglect or wounding by abandonment, by actual neglect in your physical health and its routines, like I started to see these are the areas that we develop patterns around. And it's the part of ourselves we tend to want to hide or edit. Like, you don't want to talk about that when you meet someone new, or even when you're entering a relationship, you feel like, oh, like maybe they won't discover that. But
Yeah.
that only causes it to come out in like sideways
Yeah.
ways. When we try to repress and hide that awareness, even from ourselves, and we try to, for example, my Chiron in Aries having to do with the core wounding of vulnerability and my sense and value and worth. A lot of people that have Chiron in Aries are successful outwardly, professionally, people you're really well liked. yet somehow inside of your own self, it's like, I never felt quite good enough. Like I
Mhm.
felt like I had to keep doing more to prove, not even to others, like prove to myself that I'm good enough. A lot of performance based love, a lot of like taking on, let me handle this, let me do this, and yet feeling burdened and overwhelmed, yet feeling like it's hard to let other people know, like, oh my God, like I'm maxing out here, like I might need some help, because it's hard for you to ask for help. You feel
Yeah.
like maybe others won't want to help you, or they'll judge you for being weak. And so when I started to see that Chiron and Aries, how it really was like a driving factor in my self esteem, I could solely focus my affirmations around I'm
Mm.
good enough as I am. I don't have to do another thing. I can just be, allow others to come to me. And it really started to change the way I had to learn to sit back and let things come to me. And that was really uncomfortable, Riley. As a
Yeah.
super action oriented person, I'm most comfortable taking action and being assertive. And so learning to receive sometime meant, days go by, weeks might go by before I hear something. But it's like, in allowing that to be invited into spaces, like it helped to heal me having to do it all. Is that making
Yeah.
sense?
I
And
don't
and
know.
answering where spirituality and psychology kind of meet.
Absolutely. And as I'm listening to you, I have never been able to figure out what the time of my birth is. So I've never been
Yeah.
able to get a proper chart reading done. But I
Yeah.
question if maybe I have an Aries and Chiron, because what you're sharing, like that's me. That's the same moon that I have been working on for the past year and a half, and really just
Yeah.
started to learn to, I guess for lack of better term, supersede. Like I finally came above that wounding where I'm very action orientated. I thrive the most when I'm out and doing and learning and action.
Right.
So it's really interesting that you share all that. But yes, it absolutely answers it, because there's so many other things that make up the components of our reality.
Mhm.
And we're really truly only indoctrinated to see things one way. But when we start asking the questions and we start ultimately just wanting to learn more about yourself through
Yeah.
astrology, through all the different channels, through psychology, through Enneagram tests, through all these different ways,
Yes.
you
Yeah.
compile all this information that becomes the data bank of you. And then you have a better understanding of how you make choices and what you
Right.
can do and where you can focus. So I really love the way that you explain that, because I feel like a lot of people in my audience are going to be like, I wonder if I have an Aries and Chiron too.
Right. And it's okay if you don't know your time
Yeah.
of birth, Riley, because it'll give you, I have an interactive chart when you get my book. And if you go to nolatherapy.com/Chiron, you can
Okay.
read about the book. You can enter as much as you know. All you need is your city of birth and your date of birth to know where Chiron is, if it's an Aries or Gemini or Taurus or Leo. And that'll
Okay.
give you enough that the time just gives you the house placement, which means the area of your life that this manifests. But I think,
Mm.
you know enough about yourself. Does this manifest at work, in my professional life versus my self esteem? So that's not as important is
Okay.
just having your place of birth and time of birth. And then I give takeaway steps, like, for instance, Chiron and Aries that we're talking about, this core wounding, this vulnerability in your sense of value and worth. We tend to want to say yes to everything because we get so excited about it. But then say you say yes and other things come up, and then that date, that thing comes around, and you might not want to do it for whatever
Yeah.
reason, but you feel like you don't want to appear flaky,
Mhm.
or so you might do things you don't want to do just to keep your word. And at some point, that doesn't serve your evolution or growth. So, one of the takeaway steps I offer is simply when someone asks you to do something, to learn to say, hey, that sounds awesome. Let me check my calendar and get back to you. Even if you know there's nothing in your calendar, because it
Yeah.
gives you that buffer of time to
Yeah.
really sit and determine, is this in my best interest? Does this really work? So it's like these little tweaks that we can make our lives just be more authentic.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
I love that. I think that's a very valuable takeaway step. And it's something that I equally teach people too. It's like, especially for the people pleasers where they're so quick to say yes because they don't want to disappoint. It's like, what are ways that we can step back and add in different language or different types of conversations to be like, you know what? Just like you said, I'm going to check my calendar and I'd love to get back to you. And then you have that time to process and think and actually mull it
Yes.
over and so on and so forth. And I'm definitely going to be linking all of your stuff in the show notes to this. So
Thank
you
you.
guys can go and check it out, order her book, dive into all the things that she has for you to learn about your Chiron energy. Um, there was a question that popped up for me and then I got sidetracked. Oh, how did your book come to be? So you talked about how you started to go deeper within, the energy of wounds and how spiritualism really did play a part in that. And so when it came to actually physically sitting down and writing the book, what was that moment where it was like that download where you're like, I can't not do this. Like this has to be available
Yeah.
to everyone.
It was very visceral and physical, Riley. When I first received in meditation, Chiron, and it kept prodding me, Chiron, 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 until I started to Google and understand it being an astrological placement. Carl Jung wrote about Chiron as this
Mhm.
archetype that I had remembered vaguely from grad school. And then, it just, I didn't know this was going to be a book. But as I started to take notes by hand, just in a notebook, I started to receive these consistent downloads of awareness, like aha moments, like, oh my gosh, this is kind of what you've been overlooking. This is what you've been trying to address. And, my clients mirrored it. When a client would come in and say, oh my gosh, I don't know what's wrong with me, I felt
Mhm.
like I wanted to start saying, stop. And I did. Like, there's nothing wrong with you.
Yeah.
Like, there's things you're having healthy responses to abnormal situations, and really wanting to help my clients and even friends like be less judgmental and critical of themselves. So
Yeah.
that's where I started to get the download around forgiveness and self
Mm.
forgiveness in particular, which is in the title of my book, because I think often forgiveness is presented to us as something we need to give others.
Yeah.
And without the first point of departure, what about the self forgiveness? What about the layers of judgment that we harbor and build up layer upon layer within our own minds, our own hearts? And I think, especially for women who we tend to be nurturers and caretakers and really want to look out for others, sometime at the expense of ourselves, that we just kind of keep going and like, I'll do better next time. And to really pause and know in some specific ways that I walk you through, like really having this appreciation for who you were in those moments, and to truly forgive yourself, like let yourself off the hook, appreciate the gifts that those experiences taught you. Life is always going to give us another chance to try again in some of those same areas. And so I started to see this connection between empathy, which is the ability to put ourselves in someone else's shoes,
Yeah.
and like turning that towards ourselves, having empathy for ourselves. So it all just started, and I wrote for 3.5 years consistently.
Wow.
Like I told friends that I had clients in the evening, but I didn't. It was my block of writing time because I knew I had to prioritize this or it would never get done.
Yeah.
And so I would say I had clients till 8 p.m. when I really just had clients till 5. And that last 3 hours, my phone would still be on silent, like it is for clients. And I would research and write and edit. And, over 3.5 years, it took form. And it was really a labor of love that I felt, as you said, like I
Wow.
have to get this out. It was like, no matter what it takes, like I want to get this out. And it was intense. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done. And I'm just so glad to be able to see it and hold it and like meet you and your audience, because I feel like it offers a paradigm of things that have been said in different ways. And this is another way that could relate to you in a way that causes those aha moments to change your life.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. It's so beautiful when you speak to somebody who has that calling, really that calling in them. And it's like, I don't know what this is. I don't know what this is going to transpire into until you're in the actions of it and you're like, "Oh, I'm writing a book." And it's like a year in.
Yes.
And then you get to that point where it's like, okay, well now I'm at this stage, I need to learn this. Okay, I'm at this stage, I need to learn this. I'm at this stage now, I need to execute this. And it's like you get to build on this. And I really want to just like pull back for a moment in context, finding your purpose, because it's very simultaneously related to your journey of creating this book. And that's the number one question that I get asked. I started with the title of a psychic. And so people would come to me asking, well, what's my purpose in life? And as I grew and I started to take that word out of my titles, if you will, I realized that it's like, that's never something another person can answer.
Mm,
It's a calling within you that through
yes.
execution, you develop and you learn and you grow and you add until you get to that point where it's something you can finally tangibly hold. But that
Yes.
calling equally requires discipline. And so the way that you shared your story and how you knew you needed to block out that time or it wasn't going to get done, and you knew
Mm-hmm.
that you needed to create that space, and you got to learn and you got to grow and you got to execute along the way. It's like that's very very similar to uncovering your purpose, if you will, which is ever evolving, because your book is
Yes.
not going to be the first or the only. It's not the only thing you're going to create in this world of yours, in our world collectively,
Yeah.
right? So it's like it's these moments where you feel something so deep within you that you can't explain, but you just decide to follow it because you can't
Mm.
ignore it, and it keeps coming back and
So
coming
well
back and
said.
coming back. It's
Yes.
just so beautiful. I really love that
Exactly
you shared
like
that.
that. And
Yeah.
I also, tell me if this resonates with you, Riley. I had the awareness that I feel like this Chiron was given to me because I was asking the question. So I received the answer. And yet I also had the sense that, like, this energy, it's moving. And like, if I didn't write it, someone else would. I was like, no,
Yeah.
universe, like, I want to write this. Like,
Yeah.
this is my book. Because I've thought for many years to write a book. I have all kinds of notes that I abandoned, like many of you listening, maybe. And it really took that this was something that spoke enough to
Yeah.
where I had the awareness I did have to carve out that time. It did take self discipline. I did not go to certain events and
Yeah.
dinners and vacations. Even a friend in Italy, I booked a trip to Italy, but my book, it was at the point where I hired professional editors and we were really in the midst of it. And I didn't go to Italy, and it was a non refundable ticket, but I knew, like, the time and place. So I just kind of put aside, like,
Yeah.
those types of things until it was truly finished in the sense, like, it's coming out and being published. And so it really does take that. But it was also like I couldn't do anything else. Like, it
Yeah.
wasn't necessarily hard, because it's like I couldn't imagine doing anything but that. Yet it did require saying no to myself around certain areas of my life. No, for now. Like, I
Yeah.
knew it's not like forever.
Yep.
But so I feel like this, speaking to someone that you might have a goal, a desire, and to just do it,
Yeah.
whatever it asks of you.
Yeah. Yeah. That's full body shivers. I love that so much, Lisa. That's it. It's you just have to it really just comes down to you have to answer the call, because if you don't, someone else will. And that's not a competition to pitch you
No.
against somebody else. It's like, you're going to put it in a different form than somebody else will, but we have our own unique characteristics and perceptions and view on the world, and how we're going to learn to articulate and to take those steps to move it forward, right? That is different than somebody else would. And I don't even like to necessarily use the word better, but it's like that can be something so profound and beautiful that was gifted to you to bring to the world. And that's what I feel like you feel and how you're sharing your book came to be. And it reminds me of when I started on my journey of personal development. I ended up getting a sponsorship to become a certified psychic medium. And I was
Awesome.
like, I don't know what I'm going to do with this. I was in the midst of grieving from someone who had passed 6 months before,
Mm,
all the stuff with my husband and my son. And I put the grief on the shelf to deal with what was relevant at the time. And then when we finally got all the good news, it was like, okay, I got a lot of stuff I got to unpack here. And one of the things that I knew is if one person could do something, anyone could do it. It just took
hmm.
time, attention, and intention. And
Yes.
I heard of mediums. I don't know if I necessarily fully believed in the concept of them at that point, but I was like, as the more that I learned, the more I realized, well, it's energy. So it's not like this is, it's an incredible gift. Don't get me wrong, but it's like, it's a practice, right?
Yeah.
And when I started to learn how to do that for myself, and it came so effortlessly to me, I was blown away that nobody knew this. was like, how are people not talking about intuition? How are people not talking about energy? How are people not talking about the fact that they've been experiencing energy and spirits their entire life and have been told that they're crazy? And to me, that was a calling where I was like, I don't know how the heck I'm going to execute this, but I'm going to show up on a Facebook Live, and most people already think I'm crazy. So I'm going to go for it. And
that's awesome.
start
Riley.
reading cards. And it was through the card readings, I learned how to develop reading energy without the cards. And then through doing that, I started to reverse engineer it to create processes. And I was like, people have different perceptions. So now I get to merge the psychology in this. And it was so valuable to continue to learn and grow for myself, to then turn around and teach it to other people, because it was that same feeling. I was like, I don't know how I'm going to do this or what this even means that I'm getting, but I have to pursue this because I know that there's something in this that I don't know what it is. I'm going to do it. And then I learned, okay, this is a part of my mission. This is a part of my purpose. This is a part of activating people back into that consciousness that we've been asleep at the wheel for, decades, arguably centuries. And it just, it took its own form. It grew and it expanded. And so it's like, it just makes me think about how, in the spiritual industry, it's always marketed. It's like, come and join my program and find your purpose. Come and learn these 5 tips and you're going to figure out your purpose. It's like, but it's so much more than that. And
it is,
it maybe that helps. Absolutely. I'm sure it does, but it really comes down to practice and discipline. And I just everything you're saying is just hitting so home for me. I love it so much.
And same here for me with your inspired speaking.
I love it. Okay, Lisa, I have a question for you on the world. So something I'd really love to hear from you, what you see. How do I want to word this? How do you see our world taking shape in lieu of its current climate?
The first thing that comes to mind, to be honest, is I'm not sure. What I do know for sure is that I think our individual responsibility to ourselves and to those we love and care about is to keep ourselves in the highest vibration, meaning in the best mood, and really cultivating and being mindful of what we watch, what we listen to, what we, who we join with, because I notice when I'm in conversations where there's a lot of fear, I start to feel like edgy and fearful, and that doesn't feel good. And it interrupts the problem solving functions of our brain when we are in that fight, flight, or freeze type of space that's triggered by conversations of so much uncertainty, looking too far ahead into the future that we don't know and can't figure out from where we stand. So for me, I believe that by daily meditation, keeping myself in alignment, living based on inspiration, and doing things that are helpful, that are loving, that are, boosting people up through my podcast and my conversations with whoever wants to listen, by just keeping ourselves in harmony and alignment with what is going well. Because, things always find their balance. The planet finds its equilibrium. As people, we can as well. And so I choose not to go into the fear-based television, news, conversations, groups. And you know it in your body, when your whole body tenses up around a text or a news article, it's like, oh, like, don't go there. Like, I don't, give that any of my time. And instead, I'm really into reading and listening to things that promote my sense of peace and strength. Like, our mind is a tool that we place in the direction that we want it to serve us. And without that discipline, again, going back to that word, it can run rampant. Our emotions are all over the place, and we actually have a lot more say so over our emotions than what you might be aware of by what you're consuming auditorily, visually, tactile, where you're going, what you're doing. So I've spent a lot of time, Riley, just kind of being kind of quiet and internal, and just like, what do I need to be at peace so I can serve my clients and the friends I have in my life, to be clear, to have clarity.
Yeah. I love that
What do you
answer.
think
It's
about
I
that?
absolutely agree. It's the saving grace in it all because I mean, arguably nothing that's coming to light is new. It's all things that have been transpiring over the years, the decades, the centuries anyways.
Hmm.
It's just now we have access to all that information. So it's
Yes.
on blast 24/7 in some
Yes.
form or way, but equally in both directions, right? So when you
Yeah.
talk about when you're in a fear-based conversation, even if it's meant to be about choices and options or freedom, right? You can feel if it's
Yes.
really rooted in, especially from the other person and equally yourself, when your body starts to contract and your mind starts to contract and you start to
Yes.
feel like, oh, I'm getting ramped up and I got to talk louder and I got to talk faster. Like you can feel these things transpiring through you. So when you talk about, back to discipline and promoting that peace for yourself and meditating and really making sure that your conversations are of the value that you are building your life on, then that's what we are in control of, and that's something that never is taken away from us. Because let's say the world goes into the point where we have no opportunity for movement, right? You still do within your home, within your yard, within your community, within what
Yes.
you search and research and listen to. So it's like these things are always available for us. We get to adjust and adapt, and I feel like that's really hard for people because when you start to desire change, well, change requires change, and that change has to come from you. And so we think that we want it, but then when the opportunity presents itself and we have to, okay, so there's going to be a next step for me, or I'm going to have to change this, or I'm going to have to learn this. It's like, you really get to find where your thresholds are at in regards to your mindset and your energy and your physical capabilities. And so
Yes.
that doesn't mean it can't be changed or exercised or disciplined. It just means that there's work to do. And I really find that, especially in what you shared, Lisa, it's that we all have this ability to really go within right now. And I'm finding a
Hmm.
lot of spiritual leaders, if you will, or anyone who really promotes self-development, personal development, even entrepreneurship.
Yes.
That's the topic of conversation across the board. It's like, there's a lot of noise out there,
Yeah.
right? So what are you doing to discern and to choose outside of that in relation to where you want to go, all going all the way back to the beginning of our conversation, right? Holding that vision and being that version of you and really taking those, I always say, 1 degree steps at a time make up the all around experience that you're desiring. And so what are those steps that you're bringing into play for yourself? And it really, that's really, I think, the most universal truth that anyone can argue, or not arguably, but can agree on, especially in our current climate. So I really love the way that you shared that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, love it. I want to be cognizant of your time. I
Yeah.
love how
I
it's
have as
already
much
been.
time as you want. This is
I
so
love how,
awesome.
yeah, this is such a good conversation. And it's
It
so
is.
funny because typically, I usually like to do 30 or 45 minutes, but then when you really get into it, that time just flies away. And then
Yes.
you look at, oh, that's what you mean by time doesn't really exist.
Yeah. For real. Oh my gosh. I love that. Yes. That's an aha moment
Yeah.
for sure. What you just
Yeah.
said.
And it really speaks to what we've been talking about the quality of your conversations and just like pairing up with people, like, essentially we are strangers before this conversation,
Right.
right? So it's like that, but yet we have this access to each other. And it's so beautiful because when you get into these types of conversations where you're sharing your story and you're expanding your mind and you're feeding off each other's energy in a positive way, it's like that's where manifestation really exists. It's when you get
Right.
into these moments with yourself, and this doesn't have to be in a conversation with somebody else. This can be you. And I feel like this is really a testament to what you've been sharing and what we've been talking about, is getting yourself into these states where you're bigger than your environment, and you're not in the, okay, I have 30 minutes to do this and I have 3 hours to do this and I got to get this done in 7 days. It's like just being in these present moments and listening with each other. I find this is a
Hmm.
quality that's really been overlooked in a lot of what's happening right now. And it's something that we're equally being reflected and reminded to come back to, is just like the presence. So
Yeah.
what is presence overall? Being present, it's something that's talked about often. How has presence really played a role in your life and in your journey of your spiritual and self-development?
I feel like I've been learning a lot about what that is and what it isn't. Is It's such a good question. Presence and for me, self-soothing comes up around that too, because I've learned being present in the moment, whatever I am doing. And it's so easy to my mind to drift to a memory of the past or something I desire in the future. And then really calling back my mind to this moment where often it looks like nothing's happening. It's like, okay, just nothing's happening. This is not the most enjoyable to be in, but just being able to like nothing's happening. Like that can be kind of cool. That can be kind of nice. And learning to just even acknowledge the moment and then go back into a memory I might be enjoying or a future outcome that I desire. So I think presence is even just kind of like a touchstone, like touching this moment, having awareness of it. We know we've heard it said over and over, this is all we have is right now. And I think just a momentary like acknowledgement,
Yeah.
okay, and even just looking around and then getting back to whatever thought or activity. So I find it to be almost like a mental, just a mental awareness
Mhm.
of the moment. I'm curious what you find it to be. That's such a good and interesting question you asked.
Yeah. Presence to me has really been something that I never realized um that I didn't understand. I feel like it's so easy to say, well, be present in the moment. It's like telling somebody to relax when they're anxious, right?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like, thank you. I will now.
Right.
But for me, it comes back down to that word discipline, because for my whole I guess the last 10 years of my life, where I started to, have to or want to figure out a career and, develop a family. I have 3 young kids, and it's so easy to get caught up in the future, what I need to
Yeah.
go to, where I need to go, how I need to get there, the hows, the who's, the what's, the where's, the when's. And presence has really been something that overall for me has allowed me to really slow down and tune into a moment.
Mm.
It comes back to like a metaphorical experience, where when you stop and all of a sudden you notice the snail in the ground that you've probably walked past 1,000 mornings before, and you just stop and you look at it, and all of a sudden you get a flood of emotions, or you get a heightened level of awareness, or the download, the message comes in, and it's like, whoa. And I feel like that's something that's really starting to ping people's interest when it comes to spiritual development, because they're starting to have these moments of presence and they don't know what it is, but now they want more of it. And it's
Yes.
so beautiful, because that's the practice in of itself. That's like, if you
Hmm.
could take anything away from this, it's like, you don't need a course or a book or a coach or a program, though those things absolutely help. It's really just slowing down and just taking witness to that moment, in
Yes.
those moments of the day that transpire. And I can't remember who I was listening to, who was speaking on being in the moment and presence, and they were talking about, I'm pretty sure it was Dr. Joe Dispenza, but he was talking about how, try and spend an entire day present in
Hmm.
conversation, present in walking, present in drinking, present in eating, present in dressing, brushing your hair. Be present in that moment, and do that for an entire day, and watch your entire mood and energy shift. And when I heard that, I was like, wow, that's what spiritual development is. That's what
Yes.
being in tune is, being in alignment is, being in balance is. And presence for me is a pursuit of happiness, if you will. I feel like they really go hand in hand, because you can't have happiness without being present in the moment. And no matter how much you have in your bank, or what you have to go home to, or whatever your life looks like, physically, happiness and presence really are simultaneously linked together in your experience of how you experience the world ultimately.
Yeah, and Riley, I would say too, I love what you're saying. And to even in approaching one's day, I've started to say of all the things on the proverbial to-do list,
Yeah.
like what am I most excited to do
Yeah.
first? And like starting with that and really asking myself throughout the day if I notice a lull in my emotion, like, hey, what are you most excited to do
Mm.
next? And just to ask yourself that question over and over, like, what am I most excited to do next? And then listen for what that is. It starts to change. It adds these little jolts of energy, I notice
Yeah.
in my day, in my life. Like, what are you most excited to do next? And then look for that. And it starts to create a momentum in your
Mm.
life.
Yeah. Absolutely. I absolutely agree with that, Lisa. And I love that because there comes this point when you start to shift identities and behaviors and habits where it's like, oh, this is tiring. Like, I feel like I am just trying to feed, I got to be happy constantly all the time. And it's like, you don't though, because there's an equal opportunity in learning from the sadness and the struggle and the challenge. But when you're creating and you're building that momentum and you're really shifting the way that you desire to perceive the world and equally what you desire to attract in your life, it
Yeah.
really comes down to those jolts. Like, you have to be your best cheerleader, and you get
Yeah.
to have people in your corner, but sometimes you don't. And I find that anyone who really starts to like really start their journey, and arguably this happens at every level of your consciousness and awakening, that it seems like people fall away. And I find that a lot of people right now, I work with mainly people who are just awakening into their spiritual gifts and their
Okay.
intuition. So a lot of the people that I support, they're starting to find that they don't have a lot of people in their corner, that they don't relate with a lot of people that they once related to. And so what you shared about, what's that next thing that sparks your excitement, because that's really the momentum that creates then those receiving end of the relationships coming in. When I started my journey, found myself in that same position. I had friends for 6 really good friends for 18 years. And when I started to develop myself and question my reality, I realized that those relationships weren't in alignment with where I wanted to go. And I found myself very alone. And
Mm.
what allowed me to push past that threshold of, sitting in the pity of, oh, I don't have anyone, I don't have
Yeah.
anyone, I don't have anyone, was, okay, well, what am I going to do next? Well, I really love painting, so I'm going to paint. Or I really love reading this book, and I'd sit down for hours and I'd read this book. Or I really want to learn about this, so I'd sit down and I'd learn about astrology. And there was like, and it just continued to develop where then I would show up in different ways. And I
Mm-hmm.
attracted a whole new group of friendships that are just so much more than I could have ever imagined them to be. So I really loved what you shared there, Lisa, because it's something that it comes back to the onus of self and our ability to take on how far we really want to go in our evolution. And that's not said in a competitive way, but it is said in a way where it's like, what do you want out of life?
Right.
Right?
Can I add something to that really came
Abs-
up for me as you were
Absolutely.
speaking, Riley? Because I've been in that place, and the awareness I've been having, the truly deep awareness is that, we've heard it said we're all connected.
Mhm.
And I think that becomes really important to tap into when you're experiencing a time when people when you feel more alone than a part
Mhm.
of, and when you notice that your social circle feels or is thinner than it once was.
Yeah.
What's really helped me is to know that, like, we are connected. I am connected to these people. Nothing can stop it,
Yeah.
whether you're blocked, unfriended, broken up with.
Yeah.
Like, we are permanently and always eternally interconnected, and you can work with that energy and send love,
Yeah.
send peace and harmony to those relationships, to those individuals, and start to watch what happens. There will be a shift in the quality of that relationship, of that friendship, that we really can shift those outcomes. And I think the more we become who we want to be, who we're meant to be, we start to draw out the best in others.
Yeah.
And sometime it might look like there's like a separation period in time because we're doing a lot of realigning. People might
Yeah.
not know what to make of us.
Yeah.
It might be a lot to them, but to trust and to hold on to, if you send and if you align truly with harmony and love and that connectedness, and even breathing from your heart space into that other person's heart space, it'll start to, like, you'll start to feel this, and over time it will cause a really positive effect there.
Yes. 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 Oh, that that in of itself is like, it really is the vibration of healing. Everything that you
Mhm.
said, as when you were talking, I was getting this vision of this green ripple effect of energy just transpiring and transcending through whoever's ears that this listens to, where it's light bulb moments and it's more
Mm,
compassion and it's more peace and it's so much more love, because it's not unrealistic to feel hurt by the people who aren't in your corner, who don't get you.
right.
And
Yes.
as you start to come back to that self-forgiveness of, okay, I forgive myself for choosing to go on this journey. I forgive myself for any hurt that I have said or that has transpired. And then going on to give that forgiveness that you talked about to others, right? We always have to start with self. And the vision that I had was just this experience of awareness that people get to tune into, where it's like it really comes down to love. It
Hmm.
really comes down to love and compassion, because what I've learned is that as I grow and evolve, and by no means am I perfect, and I am so open to being educated and having conversations and learning and growing and expanding in all ways, that I'm equally triggering in someone else where they get to step into alignment. And equally, they are helping me to step into an alignment by being triggered of what I'm doing or what I'm saying too. But the thing universally that can be felt is love. And we
Yes.
don't need permission to send love, to share love, to be
No,
love, to
you
give
can
love.
always emit that. Yes,
Yeah,
Riley, to that.
yeah,
Absolutely yes.
yeah. Oh,
Yes, it transcends time and space and circumstances. Absolutely.
yeah. And especially to, I don't know who needs to hear this today, who's listening, but to anyone who's feeling isolated or restricted, or, not feeling like you don't have anyone in your corner, start sending them love, because what they are wishing and hoping and dreaming and praying for right now is equally love. They're feeling
Yeah,
rejected by you, maybe by the world, by themselves, and they don't understand or might not yet see that truly love is going to help set them free. And they're hurting,
absolutely.
right? There's a lot of
Yes,
hurting people in this world right now,
there are.
but we get to be the ones that step up and say, you know what, beyond this relationship, this current experience, this circumstance, I might need to set a boundary or get to set a boundary, but that doesn't mean that I can't send that person love, because
Exactly.
ultimately that's what changes the game. That's what
It
changes the
does.
game all around.
It does.
Ah,
Yes.
yeah, I love that. Oh, I want to leave it on that note, because I feel like this is really powerful. And I feel like this is just exactly what needed to be said today. So I really want to thank you so much, Lisa, for coming on and sharing your heart and your words and your wisdom and your book. I'm going to make sure that they can all go and grab a copy and be a part of your world. Outside of your book, how can everyone connect with you?
Yeah, the best way is on social media on Instagram and Facebook and YouTube. I'm at NOLA Therapy. It
Okay.
stands for New Orleans, Los Angeles Therapy. I would love to connect with you all there. You can email me, lisa@nolatherapy.com. And Riley, I really appreciate you, this inspired conversation. I felt like I was vibrating during a lot of it. Thank you so much for bringing me in today to your audience in this beautiful conversation.
Oh, ditto. Thank you so much,
You're
Lisa.
welcome.